Hello everybody, welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Really do appreciate it. We have a good one for you. Here's what's on the show. We're talking a bit today about the CBO. They have released their finding on President Biden's big budget reconciliation package, the Build Back Better bill that everybody on the progressive left does for, questionable reasons, want to see passed. Also, Rand Paul is working with the Democrats on a very, very good cause, not selling arms to Saudi Arabia. And we're going to have a little bit of a reaction video for you here today. Getting a little bit spicy between Bill Maher and Chris Cuomo, of all people, as Bill Maher continues to fulfill his evolution into America's first real, true, conservative late-night talk show host. And again, not that that's a great victory for them either. But yeah, we'll take a look at what he has to say about Dave Chappelle, 2024, all that kind of stuff. And, I'm going to just go in cold, see what I think. We have a great show for you today. Thank you so much for joining us. It's Newsflash. All right, we're going to get right into it today, talking about Joe Biden and the CBO and the congressional budget, all that stuff. Very, very important. So the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said on Thursday, sitting here in the New York Times, Jim Tankersley, Alan Rappaport, and Emily Cochran, that determination was at odds with Biden's pledge to fully pay for the Smart climate change and social policy package would increase the federal budget deficit by $160 billion over the next 10 years. So not as, and that's pretty much the way that's being viewed as. It's not a very significant amount because, in the grand scheme of things, just the money they're putting on the table at this point, as opposed to, the possible deficit increase that it would have. And this is not the Congressional Budget Office. We'll tell you a little bit more about the Congressional Budget Office in just a moment and the credibility that you should give it, because it has a very important sounding name. It isn't tied to Congress, so a lot of people are going to give it a lot of credibility. The news is definitely not going to be covering it properly, and it should be covered with a great deal of skepticism about who is behind this and why are they making the ruling that they're doing. The analysis, the whispers that I have seen on news sites and such is that the offhand comments have been kind of referring to the assumption that it's going to be tough, but it's not impossible. The pass this bill now that the CBO score has been released. And the progressives have been, the question is, the moderates have the axe almost. The only question is, will they swing it and just say, what, we're not going to vote? Because if they do, what are the progressives going to do? Say, oh no, we're not going to vote for your bill either, like we said we were going to do for about 5 months. No, because they voted for it last week. So it is, it's a disappointing state of affairs, to say the least. So we'll see what happens here over the next few days. But the Budget Office analysis found the bill's tax cuts and spending programs were almost, but not entirely, offset by new spending and revenue cuts. This package would be largely paid for by tax increases on high earners and corporations, which is also, again, not true, because the biggest expense is, that's actually not technically. What I was going to say is not technically true, because this could be true, but the biggest expense is the tax cut for the rich. So that is something that is, or the second biggest expense is the tax cut for the rich in the form of the SALT deductions that progressives were not very strong on either. It's something that, again, you can give up. You can say, okay, I'll give you the SALT deduction, Josh Gottheimer, but you got to give me at least freaking prescription drugs. Jesus Christ. Damn. It's just the real, just refusal to use leverage on the progressive side throughout this negotiation just has been infuriating, and, rightfully so. But the fact that the bill could slightly add to the federal deficit over the next 10 years was unlikely to dissuade House lawmakers from proceeding to vote for the bill, in part because the analysis boiled down to a dispute over a single line item, which is how much the IRS would collect by cracking down on people and companies that dodge large tax bills. Some people say, for example, the IRS say it would be a lot more than the, frankly, Republicans I'll back up my statement in a sec, at the CBO. So the budget office predicted that the total impact on the federal deficit from the bill would be about $367 billion over 10 years, but that estimate did not include the $207 billion in additional revenue that the office estimates the IRS would ultimately collect from tax cheats. Those revenues would shrink the projected deficit to $160 billion over 10 years. The estimated money raised from the IRS funding was far less than the $400 billion the White House estimated it would bring in over a decade, both through enforcement actions and by essentially scaring tax cheats into paying what they owe. White House officials and past IRS commissioners say the budget office's estimates are too conservative. Using the White House's estimates for IRS revenues, the overall bill would actually reduce the deficit by about $112 billion. So it would be a reduction on the deficit, which is something that the Republicans, I can't think of a time they have ever done that. So, whenever it's the people who are actually taking substantive steps to balance the budget and balance pursue spending neutral policies, those are Democrats. Like, that is another, great example of one of the myths that we see permeating throughout our politics in such a really, frankly, disgusting manner that is just so far from the truth. But anyway, all I'm going to say is the main point of the situation is that Democrats who have stuffed the bill with long desired priorities that have been continuously watered down. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do here, because they do have the option. They do have the ability. They have the possibility that they will, push through, that they will not be deterred. And Biden is actually going to put that heavy hand on Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, whatever that may look like, if need be. But there's also a very good possibility that none of this just happens and everything just stays at zero, which is something that, as Joe Manchin did say to Bernie Sanders, he would be completely fine with. So that is one aspect to it. This is a piece here by Austin Allman in The Intercept. So talking about the current head of the Congressional Budget Office. His name is Philip Swagel, and he's a Republican, so he's current CBO director. Early in his administration, amid backlash to the ACA and the rise of the Tea Party movement, President Barack Obama pivoted toward austerity, culminating in a series of budget negotiations aimed at cutting spending and bolstering revenues. Washington has to live within its means, Obama declared in 2011, pushing for a sweeping proposal to slash trillions of dollars from the federal deficit following 10 years. The proposal, which included hundreds of billions of cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and federal pensions, and hosts of other components of the social safety net, called for cutting federal spending by $2 to $3 for every one raised by tax increases on wealthy Americans and large corporations. So the point is, we can't even just be neutral. It just has to be cut, take away from people. We've gone too far out. For many right-wing economists, though, Obama's vision of austerity was not enough. One economist in particular, Philip Swagel of the American Enterprise Institute, again, that is another one of those organizations that if you hear, ladies and gentlemen, you should hear this. They are pretty much the policy mind behind some of the most, real, just vindictive, horrifying redistributive policies and just awful kind of economic philosophy. Just one of the kind of the right wing, the center right hub of kind of neoliberalism, I would say, if you wanted to sum it up. Swagel, he dismissed the lopsided mix of spending cuts and tax increases, a mix that would likely be seen by draconian by today's standards as politics, not economics, and argued that tax provisions in the president's plan were employed to enable more federal spending in the future. So it's really just whatever you give us, we want more. That is the mindset of these people, and that is something that they, that is how they have devoured through pretty much everything in their path throughout their political time. Asked by Gwen Ifill on PBS NewsHour in September 2011 if the proposal amended class warfare against wealthy Americans, Swagel responded simply, yeah. Ultimately, the talks fell apart when conservative House Republicans refused to accept any tax hikes on the rich, sparing Social Security and Medicare from Obama's scalpel. So a big reason why your grandmother and grandfather are able to live today is because the Tea Party saved them from Barack Obama. Think about that. But anyway, Swagel, he is a prolific academic and policy analyst who spent his career in and out of Republican administrations and right-wing think tanks, is now set to play a pivotal role in the fate of President Joe Biden's Build Back Better Act. As the director of the CBO, Swagel has broad authority over the agency, which has become increasingly influential because of its role in the reconciliation process, a complex and arcane legislative pathway that bypasses the Senate filibuster, but mandates that proposed legislation be deficit neutral or deficit reducing after a 10-year window, as determined by a CBO analysis. So before the bill can reach the Senate, however, it first must clear the House, where a group of conservative House Democrats have said they will vote for the legislation after seeing parts of the CBO score, parts of which have been already released. So they promised to vote on the bill by the end of this week, and the CBO has announced that it pretty much says it'll have it all scored by Friday, with House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer saying that the House vote could happen as early as Thursday, assuming conservative Democrats go along. In a letter explaining, so that's not going to happen so far at least, the group seemed to invoke the CBO as a neutral authority, but budget scoring is a highly subjective practice that in the past have tended to produce estimates that vary wildly from the actual budgetary effects from these social programs. And Swagel, whose history indicates a deep antipathy for investments in social programs and climate resilience, has the power to help steal the spine of conservative Democrats looking to weaken the boldest climate action and largest expansion of the social safety net in a generation. It has been more than 10 years since Swagel called Obama's deficit-slashing programs class warfare, and the moral panic that deficit hawks induced in the 2010s has largely faded, though concerns over inflation remains. And pretty much the only places where it hasn't faded are in the places where people have the most power. Places like Washington, D.C., places like Wall Street, and all these areas where like the conventional wisdom still stays. And the places where people don't buy that are so much more like in populist movements and just the general public throughout not just this country but throughout the world. But yeah, that's a good idea of someone who said a literal program of austerity was class warfare on the rich. That's who's running the CBO and giving this program, this paid for program, a deficit neutral score, a deficit harming score, which is ridiculous. But let's move on. Let's talk about Mr. Rand Paul. Interesting situation going on with him in the Senate. He told The Intercept on Tuesday that he will likely force a vote on the Biden White House's first major arms sale to Saudi Arabia and is seeking out Democrats to co-sponsor a resolution. The vote would test Senators' positions on a $650 million export of 280 Raytheon-built Advanced Machine Range Air-to-Air Missiles, or AMRAAMs, and 596 missile launchers. The Pentagon notified Congress on November 4th. The State Department had approved the sale, giving lawmakers 30 days to issue a ban. Paul said he spoke directly with a fellow arms sale skeptic, Chris Murphy, about the deal on Tuesday. He said that he told Murphy that he's very interested in that, in all likelihood, he will file a privilege motion to stop the export, guaranteeing an immediate floor vote on a resolution of disapproval. Then we would follow a joint resolution from introduced with Ilhan Omar last week to block the sale. Unlike in the case of Paul's Senate motions, House rules do not ensure her resolution gets an expedited vote. Murphy told The Intercept he has not yet made a decision to back Paul's motion. My position generally has been to support truly defensive weapons sales to the Saudis while opposing sales that could be used in offensive operations, particularly in Yemen. So pretty much just saying, I trust the Saudis to, if they say it's defensive, and if our government is telling us it's defensive, our military is telling us it's defensive, I think they got it. That's pretty much what he's saying. So pretty much what that tells me is he is an idiot who just does not care about the situation and wants to look good. But someone who would probably back it for more authentic reasons, Bernie Sanders, another frequent weapons export skeptic, also told The Intercept he's undecided, saying that he has to look at the details of what Paul is preparing, but saying I'm not unsympathetic to that. After a publication, he had accepted and decided to co-sponsor the motion. Sanders had So the State Department justified the sale by arguing that the AMRAAMs helps Saudi Arabia defend against cross-border rocket attacks launched by Houthi militants, noting that the missile strikes are aerial and not ground targets. The Houthis are a Shia movement that pushed the Saudi-backed Yemen government out of power in 2014 and have been engaged in a civil war ever since. Last week, they breached the U.S. Embassy government. They breached the U.S. Embassy in Sana'a, this is the Yemeni capital, and detained Yemeni employees of the U.S. government, prompting condemnation from the leadership of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Earlier this year, Biden pledged to end U.S. support for Saudi Arabia's brutal offensive operations, leaving open the possibility for so-called defensive support, and that's what they're saying that this is. But, of course, there's always a but. The line between defensive and offensive can be a murky one. In a petition calling on senators to force a vote on the arms sale, activist group Just Foreign Policy argued that AMRAAMs can bolster Saudi Arabia's blockade of the Yemen airport. The blockade is also a main contributor to what the United Nations has said could be the worst famine in the country. So, or in a century. Yeah. So that is contributing to active human death and suffering. So that is something I think that should be kind of questioned, maybe just a little bit. At least one powerful Democrat in Congress, the House Armed Services Committee Chair Adam Smith, agreed with the White House's justification of the sale and expressed skepticism of the blockade's critics in an interview with The Intercept on Tuesday. Smith referred to the AMRAAMs as a defensive weapon and insisted the U.S. had already cut off offensive support. When asked about the Saudi blockade on Yemen's ports, he argued that actually it's not a formal blockade. It's actually vastly more complicated than that, and stands at odds with his Democratic colleague who in May urged the Biden administration to compel Saudi Arabia to end its callous blockade of Yemen, led by Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. So they told Biden, while your administration maintains that this is not a blockade, Saudi actions is undoubtedly preventing much-needed fuel from reaching those in need and exacerbating an already grave humanitarian crisis. So that is another great example of just like the incredible nature of the United States, empire, the way we do things, where we can just be, have someone be one of our like not top, I've never heard of him before he died, but Jamal Khashoggi butchered in the embassy in front of everybody. Everybody knows he did it. Everyone knows the Saudis did it, and they just don't care. Like, and they literally just do this stuff, keeping it right going, and just because it's all about that oil. It's just all about keeping that relationship flowing. All right, we can do a little bit of a kind of a sit down and watch situation. Bill Maher, who I think has probably become more and more annoying by the day, I would have to say. All right, he's really kind of fulfilling his role, I think, as the true right-wing talk show host, conservative, real conservative, like late night host. Because a lot of times they're kind of right. They don't actually have one. They don't have anybody who kind of fits their values to be on TV in such a prominent way. And I think really more than anyone, Bill Maher is getting that job done. Here he is. He's clashing with Chris Cuomo. I'm gonna check this out. It's about a 10-minute video. We probably hopefully will not get through all of it. But I think it's definitely worth just checking out, seeing what the situation is. So let's do that now. All right, so here we go. This is about, I believe, just to put you in the mood here. I believe this was just about last night. So Bill Maher. I really, it's kind of amazing how people do not think he is not a complete conservative at this point. But anyway.
And there is a sense that just being male is toxic, or just being white is toxic. Your whiteness, and it's like, what are you talking about? I've always tried to be an ally. That's what a lot of people are saying. And now you're coming after me? This whole idea of like, you have two choices. You're either a racist or you're a racist.
This is very this is the perfect kind of like liberal, sounding like a liberal, but also, putting in those kind of conservative talking points, I guess, is how I would say it. But yeah, very, 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 very sounds like a lot of people I know is what I would say.
Lived a right-thinking life their whole life, That's not. They're thinking, why are you coming after me? You know, have I turned my life over to this issue? No, but I can't. I have a job and kids and a wife and stuff to do. You know, I can't do that. Now, Josh Hawley is a dangerous guy. Let's get to the essence of Josh Hawley. He's not wrong about this particular issue, but it's minor to someone who does not acknowledge what happened on January 6th. A much bigger question is, what do you do when there are people in our government who don't believe in our form of government? And he is one of them.
He'll say, no, I believe in it. January 6th was bad and wrong, said and settled. You guys are only upset about it because you get to use it as a cudgel, but you didn't care about the black people and their allies running around burning down all those cities the summer before.
Well, it's a false comparison, and it wasn't the Capitol. And they weren't trying to stop a duly elected officer at the highest level of government from taking office. I mean, it's a pretty sobering thought that the Republican with the most backbone was Mike Pence.
But for Pence, it could have been a very different scenario, by the way.
I mean, when I mention Liz Cheney now, and the audience claps, I'm like, oh, we love her now. Isn't that interesting?
Depends.
And I see why.
Let's see if she goes after Biden a couple more times. But then again, who knows how long she's around
That's
in her own primary.
okay. That's her job to go after Biden. That's what Republicans do. They go after them. I mean, we did that forever. Republicans and Democrats were cats and dogs, and they fought. But also, Tip O'Neill and Reagan could have a drink after work. They could work together. I don't know how we're ever going to work together. How do you? We have how many QAnon members of Congress now? QAnon. I mean, Marjorie Taylor.
You're right. You got him.
How do you negotiate with people who think the Democrats eat babies?
That's right.
Where does that negotiation?
That's an obvious problem. I think the bigger problem, and I'll take a break and then we'll discuss about this, is what goes unsaid, that people won't stand up. I believe the pandemic for us was a low point on a lot of different levels. We made ourselves sick on purpose.
Oh my goodness! This is just to a certain degree, thinking about the guy who is saying this and the role that he had, in terms of making an entire state, helping his brother make an entire state sick on purpose. Oh, buddy, that is rough. That is how is this? Bill Maher, he's not someone who's not going to ever make an astute observation. I think he did a few points, but the idea that Chris Cuomo's coming out there and just being like, oh, that is just too funny. We made ourselves sick on purpose. Pandemic was a low point for a lot of people. Really bad leadership in a lot of different ways. Yeah. Who are you talking about there, bud? Who you talking about there, Mr. Cuomo? Very, very funny. Very funny stuff.
And then we kept ourselves there. I want to talk to you because you have a very interesting take on the whole situation. One more break. When we come back, Bill Maher on where we are.
I found it in my living room.
Oh my
Your
goodness.
grandfather.
I apologize. That's going to be...
It was a Ghostbuster.
There's going to be an ad there. My bad. Watching this here on YouTube. Get yourself right through. They literally have... Oh my goodness. Okay, so they have a commercial break cut through the middle of this video. My apologies anyway.
That's what the pandemic's about. What does Bill Maher think about it?
Oh. Okay, so we got ourselves through that. But anyway, I want to hear how Chris Cuomo is telling us how we got ourselves sick, literally and physically. So when we're talking about we, he should be talking about him and his brother, and the other ourselves should be, him and his fellow New Yorkers. Let's just say that.
The top echelon of government, our president says, no, it's not going to be that bad. We'll be fine. It will disappear in a few cases. Of course it doesn't. But it created a line where now we see it almost exclusively on the basis of politics. Who buys into things about COVID and the treatment and the facts? Who doesn't? How do you see it?
Well, you said we made ourselves sick. The bigger issue that is never discussed is that we were sick. Before you get sick, you are sick. This is a very sick country, still is.
Indeed,
I don't mean mentally, although that too, but physically. And why don't you talk about that? I mean, there is, let's call it factor X. If there was a factor that was responsible for 78% of the COVID deaths and hospitalizations, wouldn't you have to really journalistically report that?
The comorbidities.
I'm talking about obesity. Mm-hmm. People in the media, people in the government are afraid to even mention it. Again, 78%, 88% of worldwide deaths are in high obesity countries. 40%.
I think this is a little ridiculous, but like, because that has been reported. Like, none of this is surprising. I'm not saying you're like, oh, really? Like, obesity, it's been definitely a big part of it. And, obesity, like why people are obese, very interesting conversation to have. I think a lot of it, has to do with the fact that people don't have the access to healthy food. It's not like, why are Americans specifically fat more than anybody else? Like, what is the big difference? Is it something like hardwired in our brains, like that makes us the way we are? No, I don't think so. Like, I think that's just ridiculous. But anyway, yeah. So that is a very alarmist, I think, take there from Bill.
Diabetes, and yet no one will mention it. I do. But they hate me for it.
I talk about it, but you're right. It's not the prevailing narrative.
You cannot. People have got to participate in their health. I said this before the pandemic. I said we will never get health care right in this country. I don't care if you take Bernie Sanders' health care plan, Elizabeth Warren's health care plan.
Okay, so that's just like such a dumb argument, and that's like something that like really only someone like Bill Maher can make. Because if you're looking at someone like him, who is, for the most part, just not in any way having much touch to the, like, he's lived in Los Angeles, lived in California probably for a long time. Like, he been famous for many, many years. Like, since the 90s, he's, I think, been known as a famous comedian. Like, this is somebody who has never been... Like the reason why people are obese is not just like I'm setting out one day to get obese. It's for a lot of it is for mental issues. A lot of it is for some sort of like eating disorder or whatever. And a lot of it's just because people live lives where they have to do strenuous work every day. That's like takes long hours, and they have kids. They have the random things that just take place in life that take up time. Where you have to go to McDonald's, and then that just adds up, and because that's the way our society is structured, our food culture is structured, and a lot of that is because people want to buy the food that is literally chemically structured to have them by big companies nonetheless, to have them keep coming back more and more and more, and that targets poor neighborhoods the most. That's a fact. And that is really the big part of our food culture. It's like, no, people don't have to participate in their own health. That's just such a condescending, out of touch point of view. Like, the idea people can participate in being healthy. Like the people, if you have like a fat ass kid sitting around, that's one thing. But if you're talking about the average everyday person who is busy, who has like things to do, or has some sort of eating disorder, some sort of food thing. I don't know. I don't know the exact. I'm not a doctor, whatever. But has some sort of mental thing around food. It could be very, 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 very tough to properly address and deal with that situation. So, it's just such a, because life is just a very fast moving thing, and if you look at Americans' pocketbooks and their financial status, for a lot of people can't cover a $400 emergency. So are they going to spend a bunch of time thinking about their nutrition when they can't or it's unsure whether they're going to be able to put the bills on their table in an efficient way every month? And is it their fault for not worrying about it? No. And to say that, it's just patently ridiculous.
Joe Biden's, nothing is going to work, and it wasn't working, unless people understand that they have some skin in the game. They have to participate in their own health. You can't.
Oh yeah, people just want to be unhealthy.
And pills or whatever else they have to do the job, and we never do that in this country. The last person who tried was Michelle Obama, and it did not go over well.
When we talk again 8 months from today, hopefully we'll talk a lot before then. 8 months from today, do you think things are better or worse?
Well, they're not going better for Biden and the Democrats, and I think that's getting 8 months is going to be close to the midterm election. I think they're going to get thumped in the election. I mean, that usually happens in midterm elections. But, Joe, look, I'm glad he's there, but he's not exactly stuck the landing on a lot of the issues that he was dealing with. The time I'm worried about, and I keep talking about, is Election Day 2024 until January 20th, 2025, Inauguration Day. Because, again, if Trump loses, he will not say he lost. That will never happen. He will never concede, as I said last time. But this time, it's not going to be like last time. I mean, he almost pulled it off last time. And this time, he's had 4 years to get those people in place. So what happened?
He did not. Again, this is just one of the most probably prevailing myths that is going through a lot of, the elite liberal culture, is that he was so close, and he's going to get there this time. He is going to come, and he is going to literally chop off Nancy Pelosi's head, or whoever the hell, or Kamala Harris's head if she wins the next election or something, and she's going to take that seat, or he's going to take that seat. It's just insane. That is just not, doesn't make any kind of sense, because if Trump did win, if Trump did want to run again, he would probably win. Just gonna say that. As it stands right now, he would probably win. And second of all, the things and the idea that he was close in the first place. This was simply the January 6th event that happened because there was inadequate numbers of police there. It was not a group intent on, aside from a few people, aside from a very few active people. It was not a group that was very organized. It was not a group that was serious in terms of any sort of coup or serious interaction of any kind of precedent before. This was a protest that was pretty much allowed to come in the Capitol because of a extreme lack of security. So that is, I think, that is just a very slippery slope for a lot of people to go down. I think, especially in the liberal media, they can get themselves carried away. It's a fantasy that is fun to entertain for a lot of people, but it could lead them down a dangerous road. All right, that is just about all we got for you today. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been the Spencer Walsh Show.